Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Adam MacDonald View from Seagulls Central, and we are back in the Premier League. The season has begun and Brighton, boy, they are back. What a win today. Brighton go to Goodison Park on the opening day of the season and we've beaten Everton 3-0, and it was nearly 4-0 but for an offside goal. What a way to start the season. You probably can't ask for a better way to start a season than that. The most emphatic win. In the end, a very comfortable win, a pretty easy win. Obviously, Everton going down to 10 men made it very comfortable in the end for us. But so many things went right for us on the day. We've been looking really good in pre-season. I think the worry for a lot of us was how would we translate that now? Of course, we need a bigger sample size, but as far as the first game of the season goes, it's looking really good. Brighton had to weather a few storms throughout the game. They got through that well. There were a few patchy moments and there are some negative talking points to go onto as well, of course. But for the most part, we saw new signings looking pretty solid. We saw electric attacks. We saw ruthless finishing. And it was a continuation of really how we remember that peak De Zerbi era being, or even like the peak Potter era. It feels like that kind of positivity train is just continuing after what was, I guess, a bit of a disappointing end to last season. We're back, we're looking really strong, we're looking really deep in terms of our squad and our quality and depth. And there's so many positive talking points to get into around this game. So, such a good result. It was so good to watch it. Wherever you were watching, whether you're in the ground, whether you were watching it in Brighton or elsewhere in the UK or even abroad, hope you enjoyed the game because what a result, and we've got so many good things to talk about. As always, if you're watching this, if you enjoyed my channel so far or any of my other videos, please do drop a comment or a like, or please a subscription as well if you can. It makes such a difference to trying to grow this channel, so I really appreciate it and thank you so much. So let's get into it. Of course, Brighton have had a pretty decent pre-season as far as everything's gone. 100% record, very positive trip out to Japan. New signings bedding in pretty nicely, and of course the transfer window at the moment looking really nice for us. We're being ruthless in our purchases. We're spending loads of money, and we're not afraid to kind of repeatedly buy and then buy again. We're probably going to spend over 200 million quid. In terms of net spend, we'll probably make that up with a few more outgoings between now and the end of the window. But in terms of bolstering the squad, we're doing so much, and our attacking outlet particularly, I think by the end of this window, it's going to look absolutely insane. And it does beg the question, I think we'll have to get onto this later in the episode, but are we going to have to let someone go? I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the last week or so around maybe Adingra being one of those people who we might have to make way for all these players we're bringing in. But his performance against Everton on Saturday was absolutely brilliant. So there's so many talking points, but let's get into it. So it was a similar side that hurzeler put out to what he put out in pre-season for that Villarreal game, and what we began to soar towards in the QPR game as well. Dunk was at the back with JP Van Hecke, Veltman at right back, but interestingly, Barco wasn't at left back. We actually saw Jack Hinshelwood come in at left back, which was an interesting one. He was obviously come in and played right back, left back throughout pre-season, also in midfield. But Barco did stake that claim against Villarreal and played pretty well, but he was on the bench on Saturday, didn't come on at all in this game. The midfield two of Weaver and James Milner. Milner obviously having played a lot of pre-season pretty much in central midfield after having played right back, left back for us last season in his first season at the club. Weaver obviously making his debut in the Premier League. What an induction that was. We'll get on to that. On the left, Mitoma, as per usual, back in the Premier League. On the right, new signing Minteh, who's obviously been so good in pre-season. And then João Pedro in a kind of 10-stroke kind of 9 role in behind / alongside Danny Welbeck up front. So I'd say as far as what we've seen in pre-season, that feels like essentially the strongest side. People can make an argument, I would, that kind of Baleba should be in that side. Obviously, Barker's probably in that side as well. But as you know, throughout a Premier League season, the team changes week on week, and you don't have a kind of set side every week. But a really strong side going into this game. But interestingly, we didn't really make the best start to the game. I found that, particularly for that first 15, 20, even 25 minutes, it was all Everton. There was so much physicality in the game. Long balls over the top, headers being won, really fierce tackles were going in. And you saw it certainly with someone like Weaver. It took him a good 45 minutes to get into that game. It was only really once we scored the goal, got into that second half, and the flow came a bit more that we saw the best of Weaver. But it was a game where, for the first 20 minutes, Everton were on top. They had physicality over us. They were getting the ball into the box really well. They were winning a couple of corners. And I wouldn't say we were all at sea. That would be way too kind of extreme to describe it. But that same kind of sentiment, we did look a little bit all over the place in terms of just that kind of physicality and that intensity of play just really hitting us. And it's interesting because I suppose in pre-season we hadn't really been exposed to that too much. The QPR game, maybe the game where you might have thought you'd get that the most. But even that was, we kept the ball really well in that game. And obviously Villarreal, we didn't get that as much. And obviously the Japan games neither. But I think that was a surprise. And you wouldn't have been, if Everton had gone 1-0 up in that first 20 minutes, it would have been absolutely, fair enough. It would have been deserved because we weren't particularly bad, but it just did take us a while to get into it. Particularly, I will focus on Weaver because we'll come on to how well he did in the second half. But if we're going to be honest, in that first half, I think he was struggling. Many times he'd receive the ball out from the back, from Steele, Dunk or JP, and would turn with his back to goal and he'd lose it, or he wouldn't be quick enough in popping the ball off into another midfielder. And, it's that age-old thing of like a player needing time to adapt to the Premier League, but it couldn't be more obvious in that first 20 minutes. You can tell he's a player who, when he's on the ball and he's got time and space, he's a brilliant player. And you could even say off the ball, his ability to intercept balls, to jump in and dive in and, win the ball back, that kind of thing. He's looking really strong at physical presence as well. But you can almost imagine what was going through his head for that first 20 minutes and what his teammates would have been saying to him, like, welcome to the Premier League type of thing. Because you could see on his face, sometimes when it cut to him, he's probably thinking, flipping heck, like, what, what's going on here? Because it was a real induction of fire. I think that midfield, Doucouré for Everton made it really difficult for him to have any time or space on the ball. So that was... It'll be interesting to see how that develops and whether that's something that he can learn and build from quite quickly, or whether, because we saw it in the second half when Everton went down to 10 men, when Brighton were playing through the lines of real confidence. He was absolutely fantastic. But for that first kind of 30, 20 minutes or so, there was that difficulty. So I think, but that summed up the whole team. I think aside from players like Minteh and Welbeck, and even Mitoma, to be fair, in that first half, they were probably only three who were really able to kind of do anything. I think elsewhere around the pitch, we were struggling a little bit. I think the midfield was getting not overrun, but look, I'm probably making this sound worse than it was, but I think there was definitely a sense of like, oh God, that we were up against the wall a little bit. And despite the fact the midfield did pretty well and our defence did pretty well, we did look a little bit shaky. I'd say for that first period, we were essentially a counter-attacking team. Everton didn't have loads of the ball. I think we were kind of sharing possession quite a bit, but no team was really dominating the ball. But it was just kind of like they attack, then kind of we attack, and then someone makes a mistake, and then they'll attack, and then we'll attack, and then there'll be another mistake from someone, and that'll be capitalised on. And it kind of felt like some of the mistakes we were making definitely could have been capitalised on by Everton. Fortunately, they weren't. Obviously, that's probably a lack of quality thing on their part. But we were able to then, I guess, capitalise on some of their mistakes going forward. But I think that's something to look at, and I think that'll be what Hurzel is interested in, because obviously a 3-0 win, what could have been a 4-0 win, looks very impressive, and it was, in the end, actually very impressive. But I think maybe it's just that kind of adaptation, getting back to the new season, coming out of pre-season, you're just getting up to speed of things, everything's a bit rusty. But I think we did have to come to terms with that a little bit. In a away day, Goodison Park, it's always going to be difficult. But yeah, for that first 20 minutes or so, essentially playing on the counter. Now, I wouldn't know the exact minute this goal came in, but it was somewhere about halfway into the first half. And Mitoma, we get a goal through Mitoma. Not against the run of play. It definitely wasn't against the run of play, as you'll know. But, it was very even in the game, and it felt like a real, oh my God, thank God for that, we've scored. This will probably change the momentum of the game. And it did, because, Minteh, let's talk about him, because he did so well to win that goal. To set up that goal, and his whole performance before that and after that was brilliant. You could see he's a player who is going to take to the Premier League so well. We've obviously seen signs of it in pre-season. We all just know when you see a player that they're going to be quality, and he showed that in this Everton game. Obviously, only playing 45 minutes, having to come off due to concussion, but getting up and down that wing so easily. He gets the ball, he was able to nick it past players and pop it down the line, and beat his man so easily, cut inside. And I think some of his decision-making could have been a bit better, but, he did so well for that goal. You think before that, actually, some of the decision-making, I suppose there was one where he got in behind and he was on the right-hand side. He'd beaten his man really well. There was a bit of space, and he probably could have curled it with his left foot and tried to have a shot, but I think he tried to kind of like toe poke it, a little cross, and it kind of didn't quite work. And you almost think, just go for it, mate. Like, do what you were doing in pre-season. But yeah, for that goal, it was fantastic. Getting men forward, João Pedro in the box, Welbeck in the box, Mitoma in the box, players bursting forward, essentially on the counter-attack. And Minteh doing so well to beat his man, get past his player, get a right-footed ball across the face of goal, and Mitoma arriving at the back stick on the left-hand side, comes in to poke it home. And it was a good goal for us because we needed it, and I think that really set the tone of this game going forward. I've written here, Minteh does so well, gets great to get past his player, but he kept doing that the whole of that first half. He was one of a few outlets. I think we did struggle to kind of get a real foothold in the game and be able to get that possession constantly going. And I think our style in the first half was essentially win the ball back and bang, get it out to wingers, get out into try and get Welbeck in the game. As opposed to in the second half where we were kind of a bit better at actually dictating the play of the game, and obviously that was helped by the fact we had, they had less men on the pitch. But a word on Minteh, because he'll have been so gutted to go off at the end of the first half, going down for a really good challenge in the box, getting stuck in, defending for us, flying into a challenge, but then potentially kind of finding himself in a position where he kind of could have given away a penalty, and I think that was the appeal, but it wasn't a penalty, and he was clearly a little bit injured. I don't know if he whacked his arm or he whacked his head or what it was, but he ends up essentially, kind of going to the floor, lying down for quite a long time, and it's one of those where you don't think, is he just sat there, trying to kind of make the ref think, oh, he's injured, don't give the pen kind of thing, or was it something more? He then got up eventually after the doctor came over, and he was insistent that he had to stay on. I thought it was quite interesting, when he was absolutely fuming, and I was messaging, some people, and they were saying, they'd be absolutely fuming if they'd be going off that situation. I was the same. He clearly was compos mentis, and it didn't look like, from my perspective, well, I saw that it was actually even a head injury. It looked to me more like it was kind of like an arm injury or like a shoulder injury or something. So I think he'll be very gutted because, he did so well in that first half. And it would have been interesting to see if he could have gotten on the action in the end of the game as it opened up a bit more. But I suppose the thing is he's going to be available for the next game, you'd imagine. He seemed fine. I don't think it was actually concussion. I think it's just they're taking that precaution. And Adingra comes on for him and does so well. So that was kind of the end of the first half. And a first half which Brighton did have to get through and kind of weather the storm a little bit, but actually did really well to do that and got their goal. And maybe in a different circumstance, it would have been an Everton goal and we'd have been looking at this differently. But yeah, we go into the second half and we have to make that change due to Minteh going off. Adingra comes on the right-hand side. So much talk around Adingra at the moment. Just around, obviously, we're bringing in Rutter, we're bringing in Kadioglu, potentially others, Matt O'Reilly, you don't know. We're bringing in lots of players who can play in kind of attacking positions. Obviously, Gruder coming in as well. Does that mean that someone like we're going to need to sell someone, make a big sale? And I think there's been interest from Tottenham Hotspur. For me, it was like this before he scored today, but I think Adingra, absolute quality, and I would love to keep him. I would so much rather kind of I love Jeremy Sarmiento, but I'd so much rather send out someone like Jeremy Sarmiento on loan if it meant we could keep Simon Adingra for this season. I think what he offers is a real direct. People say, he's probably our worst winger, our technically worst winger. I could not disagree with that more. I think, maybe technically he looks a bit raw sometimes, but I love that raw, direct style. He's the kind of player who is definitely more suited to the left wing, but on the right wing, you see he gets the ball, he just knocks it past the player, whips it in the box, a bit like, way better than this, but a bit like in the way Kazenga Lualo used to, just like knock the ball past someone, try and beat him for pace, and has that ability to come inside, as we saw today with his goal, and finish brilliant with his left foot. There's so many aspects about Adingra that I like. He's not the most tricksy, flicksy kind of player. He's got that rawness to him, which I think is an asset that you need, that kind of unpredictability a little bit in a winger. And you've seen how good he was for us last season when he had to step up after Solly March getting injured. We essentially relied on him as our focal point winger for the second half of the season, obviously with Mitoma being out as well. And I think he's been really underrated. I think a lot of the discourse I've seen, and I do genuinely get it. I don't think people are being, unduly unfair or anything, but I just think, what Adingra's done for us in this last 6 months has shown that as a player in his first season at the time, he was able to step up, and as a young man was able to really take on that mantle for club and actually country as well. So I think if we can build on that this season, obviously I think game opportunity is going to be more limited, and hopefully it means that we can take cup games more serious with a deeper squad. But he may not have as many games as he got last season. However, his impact will still be just as important because he is a game changer. We saw it last season. He's a game changer. He's a match winner. Maybe not in the most conventional style, like beating 5 players and scoring, but we saw it today, just that ruthlessness to just bang, score that goal. This left foot, his weak foot. I think he really, really deserved a shout out for that. But we'll come on to that goal a little bit later. So after half time, probably a minute or two into the second half, Dunk and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, there's a little bit of a coming together, and the ref awards a penalty to Everton. Now, looking back on this, in my opinion, this was never a penalty. If you watch the replay back, you watch it once and you know this is not a penalty. The ball comes in, Dunk kind of goes to the floor to try and block it or tackle it, whatever. Either way, he misses the ball. But crucially, he doesn't actually really make any impact on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. The impact that's made on Dominic Calvert-Lewin is by Dominic Calvert-Lewin standing on Lewis Dunk. And then he goes, "Oh, I've stood him," kind of accidentally falls over. So actually, it was all his own doing. Dunk, yes, wasn't the best piece of defending, but technically, it's not a foul. There's no foul there. It's just Calvert-Lewin stands on Dunk, kind of falls over. They have a bit of a coming together. And it's a non-penalty. Everton fans will be fuming with this, but let's be honest. If you actually watch it back, it's not a foul to Everton, it's not a foul to Brighton. It's just one of those ones where the attacker goes to the ball, he missteps, they come together, bang on the floor, and it looks a bit clumsy from everyone. And I see why the ref gave it, because when I saw it for the first time, I thought, in live time, I thought, oh God. But then when you watch it, as soon as you watch it back, you just see, oh, we stood on them. And it's not a penalty. And I've seen a bit of the discourse on Twitter among Everton fans. I think they seem quite annoyed because Simon Hooper, when he went over to the VAR, apparently the VAR screen wasn't working, so he couldn't actually watch it. This is what's being said. And apparently he gave the pen just on the advice from the VAR in his ear, which is interesting, to be fair. And I think if you're an Everton fan, you're entitled to be annoyed by that, because that is kind of ridiculous. But with that said, it's fortunate that they made the right decision, because I think if they hadn't made the right decision from the VAR, that it would have been so much worse. But if you actually look at it, it's not a penalty. I heard commentary after the game, someone saying, the commentator was saying, it's a 50-50, 50% of refs would give that as a penalty. And I actually don't think they would. I think that was the right decision to overturn it. Quite clearly the right decision as well. Then there was another incident with Lewis Dunk in the second half. A couple moments later, ball comes in, Veltman has to defend it really well, ends up going down, hurting his head, I think, a bit as well. And Dunk, it kind of hits his arm, hand area. They were protesting for handball. It wasn't a handball. So we did have to ride our luck quite a bit after that period. But to be honest, I think both decisions were actually correct. And then, so kind of probably about 10-15 minutes into the second half, we double our lead. And I think as we came back into that second half, we looked a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident. We were knocking the ball about and not nice, so we were playing through the lines a little bit more. Obviously, players like Weaver in midfield playing out for the back, I think we did get a little bit undone a couple of times. That Dunk challenge with Calvert-Lewin actually came from Weaver kind of being, losing the ball when he was playing out from the back. But as we spoke about before, that's something that will develop and get better as time goes on. But we in the second half, we found our feet a little bit more, and I think that physicality, we weren't having to deal with so many long balls and over the tops, and I think obviously the goals changed the momentum of the game, and that's definitely what happened there. Welbeck scores, puts us 2-0 up. Weaver with a lovely ball, he's in the middle of the park, plays a really nice direct ball, kind of through two men into Welbeck, who's about halfway through the attacking half, and basically drives the ball himself, drives centrally to the kind of edge of the box. I think he just gets into the box, finishes, lovely finish from Danny Welbeck. And that's, it's testament to how good he's been. We've seen him this pre-season be so good for us. And we saw it towards the end of the last season. He's a player who's over the last few years really stepped up. And I think many players thought he might have come to the club and been a bit of a standby option or a second in command. But I think we're seeing his ability now to link play, his finishing ability, his ability to run beyond still at like 32, 33 is fantastic. And he's such a vital asset to this side. And I think, so many fans will think this as well. But I love that combination of him and João Pedro, because João Pedro's got that, I'd say, that same ability to kind of hold the ball up, lead the line, be that talismanic figure. But he's playing with another player who's really good at, he's probably a bit better, maybe holding it up, whereas Pedro's a little bit more dynamic and can weave in and out and has that kind of nimbleness a little bit more than Welbeck. And that combination works so well. And also, I think, really good presses, both of them. You saw it with Welbeck throughout that game entirely. He went down with cramp right at the end. And it's completely understandable because the way he was pressing throughout that game, him and Milner, I think was unbelievable, particularly Danny Welbeck. That's such a massive part of his game. And you think with the hurzeler style, that's going to be so important for him. I think hurzeler is a manager who values the press a little bit more than someone like De Zerbi maybe did in terms of style. And I think that's probably why he's playing Milner in the centre of midfield. Milner's someone as well who had a fantastic game. So many great things about Milner. One of them being the fact that he's on corners and he can whip the ball in well. And actually, yes, okay, we weren't scoring corners or making many chances in this game, but all the balls into the box from the corners were absolutely quality. And I think we've been missing that recently. However, aside from just corner taking, his passing, Milner was brilliant. Winning the ball back. I think what Weaver and him lacked in kind of legs, essentially, they made up for in quality passing, brilliant tackling. Obviously, you got that leadership well, but also the press. I think the press from Milner was brilliant, leading that in midfield. And that's how we were able to win the ball back so much. That's how we were essentially be able to play that kind of counter-attacking style, winning the ball back quickly, then going and attacking in that second half. And it was fantastic. So really, really good. I've written here after that Weaver assist for the Welbeck goal that he really grew into the game. And I think in that second half, we saw some lovely passing. I've got a vision of him sat in that kind of pivot role. And he kind of did a really nice, curled pass out to Hinshelwood on the right-hand side and Veltman on the right-hand side. And it was, you could see his confidence grow as Brighton became 2-0 up. Everton sat back a bit and were able to kind of pepper their goal a bit more. You saw the best of him. Said we pressed really well in the second half and Mitoma had a good chance for it. I remember that really clearly. But then crucially, a massive turning point in the game was the Ashley Young red card. About 65 minutes in, I think it was, a ball comes over the top to the right side of Everton's defence where Ashley Young is. He chests it down to kind of, take the ball, slightly mischests it, and Mitoma reads it like a book, comes through, nicks the ball off him, and he's in behind. Ashley Young does what probably everyone would do and pulls him back, and it is the denial of an obvious goal-scoring opportunity, and he's sent off. Now, at this point, the game has changed completely. We're 2-0 up. We're beginning to find our feet. Everton are already sitting back a little bit. It doesn't look like they're massively going to get into the game. And then this was essentially the game sealed up. And it was an opportunity then for Hurtzler to make the substitutions he wanted and make the changes he wanted. And I think it was really good. That capped it off because it meant it became a comfortable game for Brighton. I know that sounds a bit kind of trivial, but as a fan, that's kind of what you want, isn't it? Like, they've done well, they've done the hard bit, and then in the second half, basically it just becomes a lot easier for them and they can take it a bit more easy and you can see the best of players in possession and you can kind of see the fancy passes and the youngsters coming on. That's essentially what we got able to see. And I've written here, Milner did really well in midfield. I've obviously spoken that already, but I think that's when we began to see the best of those players who maybe had to put a shift in the first half. Do you know what I mean? Like with Milner, with Weaver, who had to kind of, battle a storm a little bit. We were able to get the ball, as soon as the balls went into Mitoma and Adingra, they were able to just do their thing. Jack Hinshelwood at left back I thought was fantastic, an underrated player in this side on Saturday. But playing out of position, being able to drift into midfield at times. A lovely little role for him, actually. So the only thing was, that inverted aspect of him, was a bit more difficult because it felt sometimes when he was receiving the ball on his right foot at left back, it made it a bit more difficult. But I want to see how he's going to fit into this side this season. Are we going to see him mainly as a left or a right back? I do hope we do see him in central midfield. We've obviously got quite a few players there at the moment, and for bringing Diego Gomez in January as well, but he will get an opportunity in centre mid. I mean, someone like Balaba's not even coming on, which I think is interesting. Don't know what that says. Billy Gilmore's coming on before him. I suppose it is maybe different horses for different courses and games, but that was it was an interesting change that we made there, where we didn't bring Balaba on at any point. But, there's opportunities for everyone. We got to see Billy Gilmore, who I think, for the most part, pretty much all of us had imagined, that was him done. That was him out to Napoli. Obviously, they put an £8 million bid in, supposedly, coming in again for a 12, £15 million bid. I think Brighton are looking for kind of the latter teens if they want to sell him. He's coming on. So much talk around Billy Gilmore not being suited to the hurzeler system. Now, that's something I think I might have said, but that's not something I think I've necessarily ever truly believed. I think he's a kind of player who can play in a hurzeler system. My thing with Billy Gilmore is essentially that I think he's a sort of player who you have quite a few of kind of in the footballing world. That style of player is quite replaceable. I know that sounds a bit harsh, but I think someone like Weaver could probably do quite a similar job to what we saw Billy Gilmore do so well last season. So if a decent bid came in for him, I wouldn't be too opposed to it. But he came on and he did really well again, and it was interesting to see him come on. So I wonder to what extent that kind of says something. Does that mean that he's staying now? Does that mean that, there's been a change of heart? Does that mean that the whole time kind of hurzeler has wanted to play, but maybe he's been injured or something? Is he still going and we're just kind of keeping him ticking over in terms of minutes? I think if my money was on it, I think he will still go. I think that move looks like it's going to happen. It seems like he's agreed personal terms. But I think from him, if it were me, you'd want to be still playing in the Premier League, proving yourself in the Premier League. And but I suppose he and the club have got a decision to make on that one. So yeah, and then right towards the end, we have the third goal. Sorry, this wasn't right towards the end. This was kind of towards the end, around 18 minutes. Adingra goal. Welbeck gets the ball in midfield, gets it out to Adingra. Adingra essentially does the rest all by himself on the right-hand side, cuts in left, comes in on his left foot, into the middle of the pitch, and then scores a cracking goal with his left foot, putting in the same side that Danny Welbeck put it in with his left foot, into the bottom left-hand corner, and a brilliant goal in a week where people have been talking about his future. What a response. And then he goes on about 5 minutes later to set up a goal for Ayeri on the counter-attack. It wasn't even on the counter-attack, sorry. It was just a very quick move through the pitch. Coming through the middle of the lines, Billy Gilmore on the ball, getting into Welbeck, then out to Adingra, who plays a fantastic fast whipped ball across the middle of the pitch, and Ayeri's bursting into the box, flings himself at the ball and kind of gets it into the goal in the way you might imagine like a Frank Lampard doing that. And it was a shame because that was ruled out for offside, but that showed the kind of the electric aspect of that right-hand side with Adingra on it, and the ability for Yasin Ayeri to burst into the box. Now, he came on probably with 2 minutes of abnormal time remaining, probably got 10, 11 minutes of the game himself to play. And we saw, that was really the only action we saw of him, was just kind of him bursting into the box and finishing quite nicely into an empty net. But outside of that, we didn't get an opportunity to really see him pick up the ball, pass it. You saw him being a real busybody running around Ayeri, but there wasn't an opportunity for him to really show off his kind of passing ability or his kind of, anything, a crossing ability, anything else. He scored that goal, was ruled out, and then it was just kind of like a lot of chasing shadows for him. I just remember sort of visualising that now. But, overall, a really good performance from him. I think one where I think he's going to have a role to play this season. It seems like the club want to keep him. It seems like hurzeler really likes the look of him. If it were me, I'd be really keen to keep him on. I just think, having him there, I think he's got that energy and that physicality that you need in the Premier League. I think he's a player who's naturally suited to the Premier League, in a way that maybe some of our other young midfielders maybe aren't. Someone like a Moran or someone who probably does need another loan just due to the nature of the way he plays. But he looks like he's ready to go. And the fact that he can score goals, if we can bring him on with kind of 20 minutes to go and games have opened up a bit more, get him into the box. And if the ball drops, who knows? He seems like a really dynamic player in that sense. And I would love to see more of him. But yeah, so many positive. Dunk came off around 75 minutes. Webster came on. Webster, really solid. Particularly, I loved the way he was playing the ball with his feet. I thought it was brilliant. Played a couple of balls through the lines really nicely. There was one into Hinshelwood and right towards the end where Hinshelwood kind of miscontrolled it a little bit, but if he hadn't, it would have been a great opportunity. So Webster coming back into this side after some difficult spells last season and looking really, really solid. Obviously, Dunk, I'm guessing, having not had much of a pre-season, only having played that Villarreal game after coming back from international duty, could have probably only got through 75 minutes. So I think that's totally fair enough. But yeah, I mean, overall, what a way to start the season. You can't really think of a better way to start the season if you're a Brighton fan. After the game, being top of the league, scoring 3 goals, actually scoring 4 goals, but, winning a game by 3 goals. It was unbelievable. It was so good. Our attack looking really good. We had to weather a few storms. The new signings bedded in well. And I think Hertz has probably now got a taste of Premier League football, as has we for Minteh. And we go into this Man United game hopefully pretty unscathed, I think. Obviously, they'll have to do checks on Minteh and Veltman and probably Dunk as well. But I think everyone's going to be looking pretty good, looking sharp going into that United game. And I wonder how he's going to set up for that United game, Fabian Hurzeler. Is he going to bring someone like Baleba back into that midfield when we might have a bit more of a midfield challenge? Will he change the way we set up? Will someone like Milner keep his space? It's going to be really interesting to see. But a fantastic way to start the season, and one that we can really build on. You think we've had some really good starts to the season over the years, and this is just a continuation of that, isn't it? We've had Man United away, we've had I've got a couple of trips to Man United in my head. I can't remember where we started before that, but we last season we started really well. The season before we started really well. Think about that Leicester game under Potter before he left. We've been dominant in recent years towards the start of the season, so hopefully we can keep that up. On another point, couple of signings coming in. Jorginho Rutter coming in from Leeds, Ferdi Kodioglu coming in from Fenerbahce. That looks like that's probably going to happen as well, and we're still in the pursuit of Mato Rolo. I don't think that one will happen, but boy, are we making some massive moves in this window. Massive moves on this window. Jorginho Rutter set to be announced kind of any time today, tomorrow, into the start of next week. This guy looks like an absolute baller. Speaking to any Leeds fan, he seems like the kind of player who can really get you off your seat, the kind of player who can capture your heart and an imagination a little bit. He seems like a versatile player, a really technical player, and a player who can play across the lines. I think he's not a kind of a striker. I don't think he's a particularly like a winger either. I think he's one of those versatile players, maybe a bit like a João Pedro, who can play off both feet, who can play off all sides. And I think the fact that we've lost Gross, we've lost so much of that creativity through Gross, means that we're having to find it in other ways. And we're not going to be able to replace Gross kind of like for like. And what I think we're essentially doing is really diversifying how our attackers play. And I think having players like a Rutter who can play in different positions, have that technical ability to create goals. He's not a prolific goal scorer. He's more of a creator, I think. I heard a Leeds fan say that he's kind of a vibes player. He kind of he captures the essence of how your team play. However your team, when you watch a team well, it will all kind of come through him. And I think that's something we really saw through Gross as well, wasn't it? It's like if you don't know what you're watching, you probably don't notice massively kind of his impact. But the impact Gross had was so important, and I think Rutter seems like a player who can create loads of chances for us, and I think he's going to be massive. £40 million, it's a shed load of money, but it shows how much Brighton rate him. He's a young man still as well. There'll be sell-on value there, and I think it's a really smart signing, buying players who can play across the front line, who can be versatile, he's played in the Premier League as well, to be fair to him. And Leeds fans are gutted. It's a lot of money, but I don't think that makes up for the fact. I think when you get that recommendation from Leeds fans that they weren't too bothered about losing like a Crescencio Somerville as much as losing Rutter, because Rutter encapsulated more than just kind of goals and assists. And I think those kind of players for clubs are just quality. That those talismanic figures, those cult hero type figures, who can kind of really take to fans and change games and create fun moments. I think they're so important, and it sounds like that's what Jorginho Rutter is. So yes, God, so much going on at the moment. I think these last 2 weeks of the window are going to be massive, and I'll be jumping on to react to any breaking news over the next couple of weeks. We're going to have probably some big signings coming in the next 24, 48 hours or even week or so. But what a result. What a result for Brighton. Going to Everton, a difficult away day, tight pitch, big fans. loud fans, big fans. And we got through it really well, and we got through the battle really well, and we managed to kind of ultimately show our class in the end. Man United next weekend, going to be a tough test, going to be a very different test, and I'll be previewing that next week. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Please drop me a comment. What did you think? Did you watch the game? Who would be your man of the match? Who stood out for you? If you were hurzeler, what would you do for the next game? Do you think he made the right decisions? Let me know in the comments. Do you disagree with anything I said? Do you agree with anything I've said? Please let me know. As always, get involved in any way you can. Drop a like, drop a comment. Please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later this week. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, up the Albion.